Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Unfiltered Vet Discussions. My name is Kelly. We have Jenny, Peter, and Beth in the royal wave. We also have a lot of laughter today before we even got on. So if we can keep a straight face, probably won't happen. I'm not even going to bet that it's going to happen today because we're just in one of those moods. So please laugh along with us. And while you're doing it, like, share, and follow us on all social media platforms and podcast platforms. So today, partly while we were laughing, is because of assumptions and clear communications. So, assume is you make an ass out of you and me when you assume. And then we started talking about some of the assumptions. And then we decided Labradors were our mascot for today. Right, Jenny?
Yes, they assume that everything is food. So rocks are food and socks are food and the arm rests on my couch are apparently food because this is why we can't have nice things. What else is food? My son's gym shorts are food.
Hmm.
So all of those assumptions that they're just, yeah, everything is food for a lab. And
Hmm.
then they wag their tail like, guess what I have? It's the best. So, yes.
Yes.
Dangerous assumptions that labs make.
Oh, that's why I
Why
married a
did
vet.
you assume? Why did you assume you might actually get a smart one?
Because I had one once. I had one, and her name was Jazz, and she was the smartest lab I've ever had. And she would play tennis, like ball by herself. We had this was when we lived in Colorado, and if it rained a lot, we'd have like this little mini river go through our backyard, but we were at a slant. So she would run to the top, drop a tennis ball, bounce back and forth across the little river until it hit the fence and stopped. And then she would grab the tennis ball and take it back to the top. I mean, it was like this was before they had those things that shot tennis balls, and she figured all of this and she was so smart. She also so smart that she figured out how to open up our closet door with a regular knob door handle and ate a 2-pound bag of peanut M&Ms. So, smart enough to kill herself. But no, she didn't kill herself. She actually, unfortunately, she only lived to 2 because she had lymphoma, a really bad case of lymphoma. So, like, my
Hmm.
heart smart dog di- died at 2. And I have ever since then been looking for another lab that's as smart as her. And I think we're on labs. Let's see, I have 4 right now. And so I think this is like my ninth or 10th lab. And I had one that was close. Star was close, but no, for the most part, they're all just very
Jenny,
pretty.
it's not gonna happen. It's not
Shh,
gonna happen.
Beth, it's like, that just hope keeps me alive. And until then, I have 4 very happy labs whose tails never stop. And, they're just hopefully teaching my kids to pick up their stuff. So,
Well,
I I'm
what
a
you
little.
just what you just indicated from an assumption standpoint, from a knowledgeable spouse of a veterinarian working in the veterinary industry, is the plethora of assumptions of pet owners who go out there and get the perfect pet because they assume that what they have seen on TV at the Westminster Kennel Club or the Purina or whomever Eukanuba Kennel Club, that they all look that way and act that way. And just remember Paris Hilton and her Chihuahua and all of the dogs on the 101 Dalmatians. Yeah, they're all just like that. So congratulations, you're now a client of a veterinary hospital.
I am frequently.
I mean, more realistically, it's probably based on like Marley and me.
Yeah.
I think that's more realistic,
I think
honestly.
that is an accurate description of a lab. And if you've ever owned a lab and then you read that book or you watch that movie and you're like, yep,
Yeah.
100% accurate.
Yes.
And you want
Accurate.
to kill your dog, but then they wag their tail and look at you really cute and you're like, okay, come sleep in my bed.
We're over it.
So yes, I did make those assumptions. And you're right, Peter, because we see that all the time, right? Like you'll see what 101 Dalmatians comes out. People go and get Dalmatians. They don't know that they're bitey.
Yeah.
And then
Maybe
we have
not
to
a family
educate them and
dog.
they're like, "What? What do you
Mhm.
mean this dog's, doesn't isn't good with kids?" Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No,
it's
no,
hard.
no. But we do it with people too. Like we make assumptions based on our own personal track record and lived experiences, right? That's the only thing we have to go through. And then we look at something, say, like a contract or an agreement or a job description that's very two-dimensional with no background or history to it. We look at that document, we apply our own history and our own lenses to it and come up with an interpretation. And that's sort of an assumption, which may not be actually what other people think, right? Because they're doing the same for themselves, right? Because Jenny, we were talking about job descriptions beforehand, and those are tricky little buggers.
You think you're clear.
You think you're clear.
You're like, yeah, no. I love
You're
when,
not.
what is at the end of every job description? Any and all other.
Duties as assigned.
Side.
Yes. And people will
Yeah.
be like, "Well, that's not on my job description." Yeah, it is, because any and all other duties as assigned.
Yeah. The slush
And
fund
The
of
small
the,
print.
yes.
It is
Pe-
hard.
People make assumptions about people's behavior all the time too. Like, I
Yes.
know we've kind of talked about this before, but one of the first things I always think of is like how my team just assumes if they don't see what someone else is doing, that they're not doing anything. Like, I feel like that's such a tough situation because they'll be like, well, you're supposed to be helping me in rooms and you weren't here, probably because you were off, fingering your belly button and not doing anything. But that person is like actually downstairs assisting with taking x-rays, but they just assume that they're not doing anything instead of like taking a minute to find out what they're actually doing. I feel like I just see that happen over and over and over again, and no one ever learns from it. Like then they're proven wrong and they're like, oh, okay, well that must have been a one-off situation, even though that's like what the reality is every single time.
All right, I have an HR issue there with the finger in your belly button comment.
I tried to just slide it in to see if you guys
Forget
noticed.
it. You aren't getting away with that because if I said anything like that, I would have been biatch slapped.
Maybe a little bit.
Maybe a little
But
bit.
It is.
you're absolutely correct. I joke that the pharmacy in most veterinary hospitals is known as the demilitarized zone. It's because the people up front don't think anybody in the back is doing any work, and the people in the back don't think anybody up front is doing any work. And the only place that they come together in a land of peace is the pharmacy, because that's like the 18th parallel between North Korea and South Korea. So, and it's assumptions because unless you cross-train people or have them work in other parts of the practice, they have no appreciation of what everybody else is doing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
so true.
And
And
it's interesting because this is where I think we always assume we're the hardest working person, right? Nobody works as hard as me in this practice. So everybody else is slacking off and, watching Oprah and eating bonbons or whatever and not fingering their belly button. But Peter's like, stop saying it. But
Do I
it's
have to be the adult in the room?
no, we would never expect that.
I
But
wouldn't either.
it is interesting because there is this thought process as I'm the only one looking out for the rest of the team. I'm the only one that's working hard. I'm the only one, and everybody else is showing up late or chit-chatting and not doing their job, or right, the receptionists are out to get us in the back because they just keep scheduling all this stuff, and or the doctors aren't listening to the technicians, or right, the technicians are out back just goofing off while we're up front and all the clients are sitting there staring at us, and these assumptions based on everybody's working hard. I watched Megan Brashear a couple times at VMX, and she always says, assume good intent. This is that whole idea of somebody cuts you off on the highway and you are laying on the horn, flipping them off, road raging, your kids start hearing all the bad words. That's where they learn how to cuss, right? In the car.
right.
That's where I learned how to cuss from my dad. And then you cut somebody off and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't even see you. And the person in front of you didn't go, boy, Jenny's driving that minivan and I can't wait to cut her off. Like, they don't know who you are, but you assume they're out to get you. And this is that it leads to a lot of anger and resentment. And then you're in a bad mood because some asshole just cut me off on the highway. And it's like, It was probably some like mom who was trying to keep her cool because her kids are throwing Cheerios around the back of her car, and you don't know. So it's hard to get yourself out of your own little bubble and say, "Oh, maybe
But
they're struggling too."
but I think you kind of skirted around an issue that's with all of this, right? It's somewhere inside of us that we're already worked up. We're feeling stressed. We're feeling overwhelmed. We're feeling pushed. We're feeling pressured. And we don't say, I'm feeling pushed, pressured, I could use some help, right? Instead, we assume somebody else should just understand,
Mhm.
understanding that you're drowning right now. Like in this moment, I am gurgle, gurgle going under, right? And so then, because you desperately want a lifeline, you bitch because nobody's throwing it to you, and because they're not throwing it to you, therefore they're not paying attention to you, and they're picking daisies in the backyard of the veterinary hospital and singing kumbaya, and you're just screwed, right? In reality is we have to learn how to say, I'm not doing well, I'm drowning, I need some help here. Does anybody have 2 hot seconds to do A, B, or C for me, right? I mean, that's generally where it comes from, I've noticed.
Mhm. And I think I definitely make this mistake all the time of just like assuming people can tell that I need
Right,
help and
right.
then being mad when they can't. Which I feel like is unfair, really.
Well,
But we all
because
do it all the time. I
we
do
do
it all.
it, but telepathy isn't a thing yet.
Not yet.
Well,
I have a
all of
client
us,
that she telepathically speaks with her cats.
Okay.
Hey, she could start a business doing that.
Well, except for that lady, I guess.
Sorry, Peter, what were you going to say?
well, as I was picking my belly button, I came up with a thought that really the four of us in the room now, and everybody who's on this group, this platform, really are leaders. And there's a hesitancy, there shouldn't be, but there is a hesitancy for leaders to show weakness
Yup.
and to um, indicate that they can't do something. So we routinely will put ourselves into positions of discomfort and not let people know.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
which means when you're in a bad mood, Beth, which I doubt ever happens,
It
um,
happens. You can ask my team, it happens. It's just not very often.
think
As
of the
in every
assumption.
10 years, but that's okay.
And then
Like,
when it happens, they're all like this, like the entire day. They're like, ah, she's
But think
broken.
of think of
But
the
anyway, sorry.
assumptions that are going on in your team when Beth is not in her normal even-keeled self, or Jenny is in her normal frenetic self, or Kelly is not in her normal passive self. I mean, when we get out of our normal routine, think of the assumptions around us, and that's why we protect ourselves and put ourselves in these Teflon boxes or whatever, so that we try to avoid people assuming anything about us.
mhm.
To nothing but assumptions. And it's Brene Brown talks about this all the time,
Yeah,
right?
I was gonna bring her up.
Yeah. And it is. It's just that whole daring to be vulnerable and daring. And it is the scariest thing because vulnerability might mean um rejection. It might mean, maybe somebody just doesn't care. If you're vulnerable and say, I am drowning right now. And I remember, and this is a horrible moment, I remember doing this to one of my managers at Colorado State University. And I remember going to something with her that I thought was extremely important. And she said, Jenny, I have my plate full right now. And I walked out of there going, she doesn't get to have her plate full. This is her job. She should be helping me, blah, 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 blah. And now I look back and I'm like, Tracy, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry because it's awful. But I was young and I didn't know. And I
Yeah.
think we assume that we have to have it all together all the time. And our team sometimes assumes that. Our clients for sure assume that.
Yep.
the stress on veterinarians to not, you know, tell me what's wrong with my pet. And now you've done 50 million different diagnostics, and guess what? You still don't know what's wrong with their pet. And their assumption is you should have all the answers. You're a professional and you should be able to make my dog live forever, right? Because we know like Bruce can't die. We already know this. Bruce has to live forever because if not, Peter's in big trouble with his hardest client, his wife,
Yeah.
because Bruce has, and you're a veterinarian, so you have to know how to do this. So there's a lot of pressure that clients put on us too, that you have to know everything at all times. And that's an assumption that we're not human, you know? And because we can't be human, it's hard to be vulnerable and say, no, I really don't know the answer to this. No, I really am overwhelmed. And so how do we, I don't know, how do you overcome that? How do you say, wait, I am just a person?
It is funny when Sharon turns to me and says, "Well, you're the doctor." It's like, give
Well,
me a
see,
break.
Simon does that to me. He's like, "Well, you know, I'm a doctor," and I'm like, "Not about whatever illness is, going on with like, I think I'm having a heart attack. You're a veterinarian, so bring it down a notch." But yeah, you are a doctor. You're gonna make Bruce live forever, right?
Well, even being raised with a doctor for humans, oh God, he was the worst with his own family, right? So we all learned don't talk to dad about nothing because he'll mess it up, right? And there is some assumptions too, and I talked to some people about this, and like, especially with personal health, like kind of segueing into that for a little bit. Each one of us in the room know our bodies better than anybody else because we're in it every single day for good, better, or worse, right? So if we know where our back hurts, well, we know where our back hurts. We may not know why, but we know our back hurts. Like right here is where it hurts, and don't tell me otherwise. But like I remember when my daughter was young, like 3 years old, and we have genetically a milk allergy that runs through the family. So it's just a known thing. And I took her to an alert pediatrician allergist, or however you say that. And he goes, "Well, she's not allergic to milk." And I then pulled down her little pants, and she had huge hives all over her legs. And I said, "Well, then what are these?" Because I just gave her milk. And he goes, "That's unfortunate." And I said, "Well, we have a milk allergy in our family." He goes, "Well, the test says not." And I said, "Well, what does the test for?" And he goes, "Just protein." I said, "Well, there's a lot more to milk than protein. There's fats, there's all sorts of things." He goes, "Well, she isn't allergic. I don't know what to tell you." And I'm like, "I do. We're gone." Like, and never went back. But again, trust your own self and your own knowledge about you, your family, your team, your workers, your veterinary practice, your business. Start there. And then I think you have to own it. Like, as all owners in this room, we have to be transparent about our own things, and own it. Stick to facts, but own it.
Well,
That
we
was
do
a little
profiling all the
sidetrack, but yes.
I mean, Jenny, Beth, Kelly, yourself, we profile all the time. And if
Yes.
I when I don't know somebody and somebody doesn't know me and they look at me, I'm I'm told I'm threatening and intimidating. I know it's hard to believe, but I've been told that, he doesn't want to talk to anybody. And because I basically put on a no face, not a non-interpretive face, but we do this with clients based upon what they're wearing and what they're driving. We
Mm.
do it with people when you're walking down the street. I've gotten people who walk around our neighborhood that we nickname because of the way they present themselves. Um, and if you read Malcolm Gladwell, Thin Slicing, in a nanosecond, we make a judgment until we have a chance to interpret that person and get some context to be able to um, use fact but we make up stories. I had fun. I was at a hotel with Sharon. We were sitting out on the balcony overlooking the beach. This was in New Hampshire, in Hampton Beach, one of the 14 miles of beachfront that New Hampshire has.
That's what we got.
Yeah. And we were sitting there looking out over the beach, and we would tell stories of people crossing the street with their kids, and the kids were running free in the street or whatever the case may be. But who has any clue? But you make assumptions based upon what you see until you can collect data to validate it. And we do it all the time.
All the time. It's how
And
we
that's based
navigate
on
the
what we
environment.
know, right? Like, maybe one day, when you were younger, you knew somebody who was a real jerk who owned a pickup truck. So now everybody who owns a pickup truck, oh, they're just a big jerk. And
Mhm.
then, they're not. They're just own horses and have to be able to haul their horse trailer around. You don't know, but it's hard to overcome those assumptions and say, okay, admit I don't know in this situation. And so I'm gonna see what happens. But also, that's how we start to feel safe with people, right? Like I will go for a walk, and if I see a man walking by themselves, I automatically assume they are not safe. And that's based on, media, that's based on my personal experiences, that's based on all this stuff. And they might be like the nicest, it's Peter, to be fair, I don't think I've ever thought of you as intimidating. I'm sorry. Maybe, I know, maybe I should have. I don't know. But no, I mean, like my husband gets it all the time. He's a big guy. He's got a big beard, and people are, oh, he's scary. And he always has that face because he honestly has horrible vision. He has a nystagmus, and so he can't see. So he just always keeps his face flat, and people think he's like not, he's the nicest teddy bear ever. But you make an assumption based on what you know. So how do you overcome that? Like, how do we train our brains to not jump to conclusions?
It's hard to do. I was just thinking about an example. Like I recently had an appointment and it was like this younger couple and they, were sort of like hippie-ish and definitely see like I assumed that they didn't have any money. I just assumed it just based on their appearance and how they were talking. And it was like, I feel like such a jerk afterwards, but I kind of assumed. And they had a sick cat. And it was like an old cat. And, people with old cats, I feel like a lot of them are like, well, they're just old and they don't really want to do anything. And I still try really hard to like, present the same information to the same people, or to every person, but I feel like sometimes you do inadvertently like kind of assume. And so like I like mentioned blood work to them as part of their like old cat losing weight and blah blah blah. And in my head I was like, they're never gonna do it. And they were like, yes, we definitely want to do it. And I like mentioned x-rays and they were like, yes, I definitely want to do it. And if we find abnormalities, we would do an ultrasound. And I just remember like taking the old cat out of the room with my nurse and I turned to her and I was like, what a humbling reminder that I should not assume based upon how people look. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I assumed that they weren't gonna do blood work. And I just mentioned it because I was still trying to do a good job for them. And I feel like a total jerk now because in my head I was like, they're never going to do this. And then they absolutely did. And then they absolutely followed up and we found, hyperthyroidism or whatever it was. And they've treated it and have been really great pet owners. And I took like one look at them and was like, they're not going to do anything. And that's like, I'm an educated person who tries to be fair and approach every person to meet them where they are and present the same information. But like, I totally do it too. And my nurse was like, I can't believe you just like said this and like admitted that you judged them. I'm like, yeah, because I'm trying to be like honest about it as a learning experience for myself. Like I feel like we have to talk about it, especially with our team. If we're talking about like things at work, like those situations I feel like are really important to like address the elephant in the room so that people can learn from it. So that maybe next time I go into that situation with more of an open mind, not assuming one way or the other. Give the people the opportunity to make that decision. Whether it's what I think they're going to make or not is kind of irrelevant. Like it's more on them than on me, but I shouldn't be assuming.
But you broke the silence,
Yeah.
which is an invisible should, which is what I just wrote about in this book that I'm publishing. It's the invisible shoulds, it's those cultural things where nobody told us not to break the silence. Nobody sat us down in third grade and said, don't break the silence in social situations. That's a no, right? But it's those invisible shoulds. And then we create it ourselves and we self-police it too. And then we redo it again, and it's like, why am I doing this? It's true, but
Mm,
they're all around us all the time, but doesn't it feel so vulnerable, Beth, to break
mm,
the invisible should and just go, okay, I'm going to talk about this. And then your technician or nurse who was with you was like, broke the silence too, and in astoundment and saying, I can't believe we're talking about this.
mm-hmm.
So
Well, it
it sounds, go
makes
ahead.
for great stories.
It
I
does.
can, I, you guys probably do it looking at a resume before
Oh,
you interview somebody and you
Mm.
envision in your head what they're going to be like. Um, I used to, when I was in practice, I would look at the welcome to the practice form, see who they worked for, or whatever the case may be. And sometimes when I didn't go in having done that, I would make huge mistakes because I hadn't gone in feeling prepared. So I went into the room for a cat with an ear infection one time with a young woman and went through the exam and was talking to her. And then I looked at the welcome to the practice form and I noticed that she was working for one of the local equine veterinarians who I took care of his dogs and other staff members. And I said, so are you one of the technicians or one of the client service people working for Dr. Betty? And she said, no, I'm one of the veterinarians.
Shit.
And I said, well, you
I,
don't need to come in as an appointment. You can go in the back and take care of your cat next time by yourself. And she said, I don't know how to take care of cats. I'm an equine veterinarian. And I said, oh, and she said, how's that going? Anyhow, she was thinking of transitioning to radiology because she had some major shoulder problems.
Mm.
Surprise, surprise, 5 years out of school. We were in the process of looking for a veterinarian. And I convinced her to shadow the hospital for a week. Long story short, what I thought was somebody who worked for a local equine veterinarian became an associate.
Wow.
And just with some training, her first cat spay was a feral cat at a pound and a half. And she said the suture material she used on the horses was larger than the ovarian horns that this cat had.
It probably
So
was.
but that's where assumptions can get you into trouble if you don't pay attention and ask questions because they will impact your opinions and thoughts in many ways.
Hmm.
well, and I think to the point about like all of what you guys are saying turns out to be communication in some form. Whether you read up, whether you admit to making assumptions, whether, Kelly, with your child, being like, no, 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 I know this is true. And if we're
Mhm.
not communicating fully, then those assumptions will continue. So whether that means, like Beth, to your example, I had this conversation in a team meeting about not making assumptions about clients because they kept doing it. Oh, this person's not going to pay this person. The people who you think aren't going to pay you are usually the ones who will be like, here's the pink slip to my car, and I
Mhm.
will make this right until, the end of time. And the people who come in, right, Peter, you said their car that they drive or the jewelry that they wear or their designer handbag or whatever are the ones who are going to fight you on the bill and, say, no, I don't, it's just an old cat. I'm not going to do any of those tests. Right.
Hmm.
And so it's almost like a flip of the mind. And this whole idea of not making assumptions, we have people all the time who will spend ungodly amounts on their horses. And then we have people who are like, nope, this is just a hay burner in the backyard. And whether they can't afford it, whether it's how they were raised, whatever. And we just have to meet them where they're at. But I had this as a team meeting and said, hey guys, I just screwed up. I made an assumption about a client who wasn't going to make a payment and I was wrong. And so I made it very clear in the team meeting like, we have to fight against this. We have to always offer the best and let them know that there are other options, that we can tier it down depending on if it's a financial constraint, if there's too much on their plate right now. I just talked to somebody whose dad passed away a couple of weeks ago, and her brain is like, I can't even focus right now. Okay, fine. What can we do for right now? And let's revisit this maybe in a month. But having those conversations as a team meeting to say, I screwed up, so now I'm being vulnerable, right? I screwed up and I don't want anybody else to screw up, and let's all learn from Jenny's really dumb lesson. But clear communication, we talked at the beginning about job descriptions. What I think it says might not be interpreted the same way by a team member. So how can I clearly communicate exactly what my expectations are? Because we might think a job description or you're trying to hire somebody in your ad. You think you're being really clear, and then somebody comes in and goes, "Oh, I have no idea how to work on large animal." Okay, well, we're a mixed animal practice, but maybe they thought that meant exotics and cats and dogs, not goats and cats and dogs. So, how can we be clear in our communication?
I don't know. I think it's a work in progress. I mean, we put out ads for graphic designers and we get internal designers. We even put website graphic designers.
And they're like, we're going to make your office really pretty.
Really, really great. And we're like, I don't know how we can be more clear that it's not an internal design. I mean, some of it, maybe people just don't read and they just, do a Hail Mary on the job, just, and apply for the job, just hoping that maybe we also need an internal designer as well somewhere. But
I think too, like just asking more questions, I think is a big part of it, honestly. And that's like going back to like not talking about necessarily assumptions with clients, but even inside my team, like amongst the team members, I find that the team members that seem less frustrated, especially on busy days, are the ones who are constantly talking about what they're doing next, are constantly asking, what are you working on? How can I help you? What still needs to be done? Like that chatter amongst the team, I think is some of the stuff that really dissolves the assumptions. Because if you're talking openly about what is next on your plate, what you're working on now, where you're at, like those are the communication skills I think that make a huge difference. But it's amazing to me how many people don't do that and are not good at it. And they would rather like take 3 appointments in a row and then be stewing about how frustrated they are that their coworker is not doing anything than like go talk to that person and be like, "Hey, what are you working on? Because this is my third appointment." And then you might find out, okay, they're with this really sick animal that they're doing a ton of workup on that they're going to be tied up for a little while. So yeah, you're going to have to see more appointments because, what goes around comes around. And then the next time it might be role reversal there. But so many people are not good at that. We talk about that at our staff meetings all the time. We've had many conversations about communication and assumptions and talking out what's going on, addressing when there is a miscommunication, but it is a difficult skill. Like a lot of people are really not good at it.
A lot of people are good at the opposite of it, which is to put up barriers to access. And great leaders ask great questions. And so I think part of your role in many ways is to get those questions going. And I think the word that we need to be more focused on is transparency, because the younger generations especially are getting so overwhelmed with information that is so um, opaque. And what we really have to be in practice is transparent, and that maybe should be one of our core values in many cases is transparent communication, because it does impact expectations. It forces assumptions, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say that prejudging assumptions, prejudging leads to prejudice. And I think we have huge problems in this country, not to get political, but with prejudice, which comes from assumptions and prejudging. And so if it's a global issue, it becomes an internal issue, and you as leaders in your practice are really there trying to keep the peace. And that comes from, by the way, understanding not just verbal communication, but body language,
Mhm.
because so much of our so little of our communication is words, and so much of it is body language. And we make huge assumptions because none of us have been trained in body language interpretation. And that leads us to even make it worse when it comes down to our prejudices against our staff, against people we may hire, and against our clients. So assumptions equal prejudice in a roundabout fashion.
So be curious.
Be curious, be
Curious.
open, ask a lot of questions, be as transparent as you can. Because I always feel like people are watching me on the team, right? And I'm the one who's setting the tone and the expectations of it, right? And they're going to take their cue from me, like how I handle situations or what is the culture in the company, right? That all starts with me. And if I'm not willing to be transparent, I can't ask somebody else to be transparent.
And when in doubt, the answer to the question of what were you doing? The answer is picking your belly button.
Yes.
You're going to use that now. You're going to find yourself using it, and you're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, well, I'm going to get Beth's t-shirt. The answer to all questions is picking your belly button, quote Beth Mahaffey.
And I think we'll leave it there today because why not? That will just be the like earworm that just sticks in people's minds from this
Yeah.
podcast,
Beth,
right?
hold up your wiener, Beth.
Here's my wiener.
Is that the naughty one?
Yes.
And that's why you're still alive because you're cute.
So cute and so ill-behaved. Right?
Oh, that's just an assumption because it's a wiener.
Yes. That one is an accurate assumption.
She has evidence to prove that. That is factual.
And
Yes.
see an earlier podcast about that puppy because
Yes.
we did a whole one around that puppy right there.
I
So
did.
until later, we wish you adieu and have a
Puppy
really,
wave, puppy wave. Come on, let's get a puppy wave. There we go.
Wow.
we'll all see you later on another podcast.